Hello, everybody. I hope you all are having a good day. So, I just wanted to clear up the air a little bit in terms of what dragons were considered to be back in the day. According to the sources that I've come across, dragons were actually snakes. Um, a lot of the dragons that we visualize today were created in the Middle Ages. Um, So when they thought of dragons or used their term for dragons back then, it would have been a giant snake. So when I think about like the revelations, it now a lot of that makes sense in terms of like when it says like that serpent, it goes back to the beginning and whatnot. And so then it makes me start to think of this and Ouroboros, and it's the idea of a dragon or a snake. And even if you were to create this image using what we would consider a dragon to be today, it wouldn't really make sense. It would look really foolish. I actually saw a picture of it and it looks really silly. So the idea is ultimately is the idea of a snake eating its own tail. And if you think about it, if the snake extends itself the way it constricts itself with movement, it would never fully engulf itself. It would just keep moving around itself over and over forever, which is an interesting concept. But it's a circular symbol that depicts a snake or dragon devouring its own tail, and that is used especially to represent the eternal cycle of destruction and rebirth. Usually Ouroboros, or less commonly Ouroboros, something such as a never-ending cycle that is likened to or suggestive to the Ouroboros symbol. And a lot of people, when talking about infinity, they use the number 8 or that type of symbol to describe the universe. It is an ancient symbol depicting, as I said before, a serpent or a dragon eating its own tail. It entered the Western tradition via ancient Egyptian iconography and the Greek magical tradition. It was adopted as a symbol in Gnosticism and Hermeticism, and most notably in alchemy. So this would be an ancient tradition passed down, like a lot of other things. So I said all that to say this, to bring this up. How many Abrahamic religions are there, right? There are three. The three Abrahamic religions, a very short introduction. In the book of Genesis, God bestowed a new name upon Abraham, a father of many nations. With this name and his covenant, Abraham will become the patriarch of three of the world's major religions: Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Now, I want to bring up the revelation again because, as I've told many people before, when I read the Bible, or now when I read the Bible, or have past words come back up to me that I've read before from my memory, it's like a different world. It's like a different matrix. When I take all the magic and the buffoonery and the silliness out of it and the lies that I've been taught from before and witness it for myself, I start to begin to understand the concept of what a lot of this book is talking about, especially in the times of the person we would call Jesus. You know, when I think to myself and go on my own journey and try to view the world for myself, a lot of those words that were written begin to make sense in terms of how we deal with the spiritual matrix on the inside and or deal with the actual physical matrix of the concepts that we create on the outside. Because as I've said before, nothing is concrete proof, and everything that we see and perceive is based on the data we perceive ourselves. It's the brain receiving data and giving us that data in a way that we can understand and interact with the world. So, Islam. The hadith, which states that the community will be divided into 73 sects, and only one of them would be saved from hell, commonly known as the 73. Now, I don't know about you guys, but that basically sounds like gambling. You're basically going in a pot. Somebody's going to stick their hand in a pot, pull out a number, and if your number is the number that's pulled out, you're saved, and the rest of the bag gets thrown in the furnace. That sounds brutal to me. Then you go and do further research, you find out that there's really 7 main sects in Islam: Sunni, Shia, Wahabi, Salafi, Barelvi, Sufi, and Deobandi. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is because if you look at this religion, it's supposed to be the same God who is never changing and who created all of this, basically. Well, if you keep reading further and you read some of this stuff, you know what I mean? There are, according to some, approximately 2,600 prophetic ones in terms of hadiths. Then in the Sunni tradition, the number of texts is somewhere between 7 and 13,000. The number of hadiths is far greater than that. And another book includes about 4,800 hadiths alone from a collection of 500,000. So okay, so I'm going to keep going. Then you go on over to Christianity, right? There are as many as 33,000 denominations, according to one source, worldwide, including the massive Roman Catholic Church, which is an extension of Rome. You're looking at people like Vespasian, Titus, Nero. These people were brutally violent, and these people were oppressive. Then you look at another source, you know, that it says there's more than 45,000 Christian denominations globally, more than 200 in the U.S. So if you go down to the bottom, you'll see that it says Christianity can be taxonomically divided into 6 main groups: the Church of the East, Oriental Orthodoxy, Eastern Orthodoxy, Roman Catholicism. If you go here, you can see more Protestantism and Restorationalism. Then you go over to Judaism, and I don't really like this source. And of course, you know what I mean? As I've said before, a lot of people who hold power control the media and a lot of these sources and whatnot, because what I'm about to read you is actually incorrect. The first source may be correct, but I'm going to branch off and explain why it's not really telling the truth. Here are brief descriptions of 3 major branches of modern Judaism: Reform, Orthodox, and Conservative. So then you go further, you'll find out there's actually more. There's actually 4. You have Orthodox, Reform, Conservative, and Reconstructionalist. Now, out of those, I don't know which ones are Messianic. They say that Messianic is a mix between Christianity and Judaism, but I believe that Messianic, there will be a one coming, has been long before that, since the days of the Babylonians, actually. Because actually even Moses spoke of it. He said that on the 3rd day he would come back from the mountain. But so I'm going to say this in a way that I can edify. On the 3rd day, I will come back from the mountain. A day is but 1,000 years to the Lord. I'm just giving these texts that you all have and edifying them. Moses said this, and according to your texts, which is what I'm going off of in humanity's history, that would be around 1300 BC, right? Or around 1000 BC. According to your texts and prophecies, that would be today, the 3rd day. So I believe this is where a lot of this is coming from. You have the Babylonians who have the Talmud and did a lot of this, but they are saying there have been more than 50 prominent Jewish messiahs. You see what I'm saying? When the translations mix over from one culture to the next, I told you before, a messiah or an anointed one means nothing more than you're appreciated, preferred, or picked, sort of speak. But who is picking you but other people? So somebody who is popular, who is well loved. And so this number is actually incorrect. There have been thousands of messiahs that have come forth. If you even read your own text in the book you call the Bible, that is an English-German book, it says that all of these old prophets were sons of men, which is apparently what the Roman creation of Jesus called himself. So then you go further into Jewish culture, the highest form of whatever you can be in Judaism is a chief rabbi, which is elected for a 10-year term. So now we're turning religion into politics, as I've said in many of my videos, which is then socialism. It is a form of government where the government has control, but then you have religion involved, which I guess is Religiosism, I don't know. The president Sephardi, the chief rabbi, is Yitzhak Yosef, and the Ashkenazi chief rabbi. So I'll give you an example. They'll sit here and deny all this Ashkenazi and European and stuff, but they're literally Ashkenazi, like they're telling you they are. Is David Lau, right? And even these names, David and all these other names, these are English German names because these names have been translated. The actual names that you guys would have been saying are not these names that are King David and Solomon and all this stuff. So then look what I'm about to read to you. How many chief rabbis are there? There are 2 chief rabbis. Judaism is considered the top because they were the first, according to text, to deliver this message because they are an extension of the ancient tribe of Judah, right? But so, and all these other religions look up to them, so to speak, or according to their text, they're supposed to. But as I've told you before, the texts have called them liars, murderers, and thieves and whatnot. And so whether they are or not, people who are in other factions of religion are going to attack them. But people who are following the peace and love are going to look up to them and be manipulated by anything that goes on with this. So read this. 2 chief rabbis. It has 2. One representing the Sephardic, the Spanish Rite community, right? So the Spaniards. And then another, the Ashkenazi German Rite Jews. Its chief responsibility, first granted in 1921 under the British rule, is to handle all cases of personal status, marriage and divorce. So all of Europe, they have representatives representing Germans, right? As I've told you, Germanic pagans or Germanic paganism, Germanic peoples, Germanic culture. Then one for the Spaniards, right? The Latins, the Italians, the Spaniards, and all these other peoples, right? Latin. So if I'm hearing this right, they basically have everybody being protected by their factions, but not protecting anybody else. But if you actually do research and look at Ethiopia and a lot of these names of Yohanan and these Yosef and these other names, they're coming from Ethiopian and African peoples. The reason Israel was offered a spot in Africa is because they did call it Negro land. That was the location. But people are bloodying and lying about history. First of all, Mount Sinai is in Egypt. If you look up the 42 laws of Mayats, those 10 commandments from the Egyptian man came from that law, those cultures. I think they had civilizations and cultures, and it's being switched around to make another faction seem like violent cave people. When in reality, if you read their own writings in the Greeks and Romans texts, you will understand. So give me a second. What did the Greeks and Romans say about the Egyptians? The ancient Greeks and Romans found Egypt an exceptionally enthralling world in terms not only of its physical features, but also of its people, monuments, and traditions, right? Why did the Romans call Europeans barbarians? The Romans used the term barbarus for uncivilized people, opposite to the Greek or Roman. In fact, it became a common term for all foreigners among the Romans after the Augustus age, among the Greeks after the Persian Wars of the Persians, including the Germans, the Persians, the Gauls, and the Phoenicians. So they considered everybody in Europe and the Middle East basically barbaric. So then you actually look at what the Muslim world and the Islamic world did. What they do, take over Northern Africa, right? Why would they take Northern Africa? Why would that place be so valuable out of any place out of the world? And then what? The Byzantine area, they all wanted North Africa and Egypt and all those Northern African countries too, right? So I wonder why. It's not, does it, you know what I mean? As I've said before, all this stuff is coming from the heart of Africa. Just like how, if you look at what Europe did to Africa and how it dug up all of its civilization and learned of all its culture and all that stuff, it's basically people are manipulating other people. So you all have the capability of being kings